Of all of the trains that I have in my collection, I think it's fair to say that the EMD F3s are the most colorful, span the longest period of time, and are the ones that I have more of than any other model of locomotive. First released in 1948 and far and away Lionel's all-time biggest seller, I'm betting that every three-rail collector has a story to tell about them. In their July 2025 catalog, Lionel released 6 ABBA sets of the venerable F3. From the classic Santa Fe war bonnet, which has been run about 1 million times, to the black Atlantic coastline paint scheme, which to my knowledge has never been made before, this new run of F3s keeps everything good about this iconic model and adds in a whole bunch of nice things. Let's talk about it. If your experience with the F3 begins and ends with vintage three-rail trains, you can be forgiven for not realizing that not all F3s made in different time periods and for different railroads were identical. There were a total of 5 phases of the F3 that EMD produced between 1945 and 1949. Some were geared extraordinarily low to pump up the torque and horsepower at low speeds, and some of them were geared to run passenger trains at over 100 miles an hour across wide open spaces. All told, over 1,100 F3A units were built for a veritable who's who of railroads, starting with the demonstrators in 1946 and ending with the last delivery to the Chicago and Eastern Illinois Railroad in February of 1949. The F3s were the best-selling road locomotive in North America for the time. Similarly, the Lionel releases of the F3 changed pretty significantly over the years. In 1948, Lionel introduced their first 2 AA sets of F3s in the Santa Fe war bonnet and shortly thereafter in the New York Central Lightning Stripe. Interestingly, both sets were cataloged in 1948 with the same road number and in the same catalog, yet the New York Central version didn't come out until the beginning of February 1949. It's crazy to think now that making the F3 was a significant gamble by the company, but it certainly was. The reason that ATSF and NYC were the original namesakes was because Lionel actually partnered with both railroads and General Motors to help fund the original tooling in return for the advertising they would get. The risk definitely paid off for everyone involved. That original version of the F3 would be the pinnacle of the Lionel post-war diesels, in large part because Lionel themselves couldn't maintain the high bar they'd set. That first version was impressive, from the portals on the side, to the paint schemes that were used, to the loud, growling, dual horizontal motor setup. In fact, it was close enough to actual O-scale that it wasn't unheard of to have them converted for use on 2-rail layouts. Unfortunately, from then until the last of the post-war F3s were produced in 1966, the legacy of that era is how every successive release was cheaper and less detailed than the one before it. All of the F3 runs had a 4-digit number, starting with 2333 and going forward. You can see that as the number goes up, the quality went down. From 2343 to 2353, all the way up through 2383, we got models that were more plastic, less detailed, with less trim, and smaller, less powerful motors. If you look at the history of just the post-war F3s, you get a pretty good idea about the power of nostalgia, particularly for people who grew up in this era. The post-war F3 is put on a pedestal as the best of what Lionel ever offered, yet what people are actually remembering are the first 2 sets produced in the first 12 months after they were cataloged. Everything else was an inferior, cheaper version of that bar that Lionel had set. After not being cataloged between 1966 and 1974, largely in favor of the Alco PA and FA diesels, the F3 made its return in the 1974 consumer catalog with the Amtrak and B&O models being introduced. This was far from a return to glory, as these resembled much more the F3s of the mid-60s than they did of the late 50s, but it was nice to see them in the catalog again. 1975 added the Southern F3 to the mix, as well as the separately cataloged Preamble Express, also known as the loneliest F3, in that it's the only appearance it ever made and was one of the few with no dummy A unit ever produced. In 1976, the Santa Fe war bonnets showed back up, and then it would be a couple more years before we saw anything interesting from the F3s. In 1979, the Pennsy 5-stripe was introduced, and we saw the return of the New Haven McGuinness checkerboard paint scheme. Lo and behold, the F3 had dual motors again, a first for the MPC era, and we even got clear portal inserts back for the first time since 1954. In the 1980s, you can see Lionel positioning the F3 as the collectible head of each catalog's premier diesel passenger train. In 1980, we see the introduction of the stunning mirrored finish Texas Zephyr. In 1982, we get another full passenger set, this time the Southern Pacific Daylight. In 1983, it would be the 20th Century Limited, the first ABA set offered together, and in 1984, it's the Overland Route Union Pacific train, the first time we'd seen the F3s in those colors. In 1985, it's the City of New Orleans and the Illinois Central, but that's the last catalog set for the rest of the decade. We aren't back to the heyday of the F3, but it's definitely been improving. In 1989, Lionel introduced Railsounds, but it wasn't until 1991 that they used the classic F3 as a showcase locomotive for the technology. The War Bonnet is back in all its glory with chromed out passenger cars, and it marks the return of separately applied ladders. In 1992, it's the debut of the Great Northern and the return of the screened roof vents. 1993 gives us additional non-powered B units to match, but there are no new F3 units or sets in the main catalog. In the stocking stuffers insert, we get an AA set of the Santa Fe Cat Whisker units, the first time there hasn't been any B units in quite a few years, although it would be offered separately in 1994. 1995 sees the introduction of TMCC, but unlike with Railsounds, the F3 is nowhere to be found in the main catalog. Once again, though, the stocking stuffer catalog comes through big, with the first of the Railsounds 2 B units, as well as the striking purple ACL F3 ABA set, the first fully command-controlled F3s. I'm still a little bitter that Lionel never sold a standalone B unit for this set, but it holds the distinction of being my daughter's favorite engine of all time. As the MPC era closes, the F3 has come all the way back to being worthy of the name and its Lionel heritage. 1996 opens with a bang, marking the return of the Super Chief set. Reusing the venerable 2343 road number, not even Lionel is bold enough to bring out something with 2333 on it at this point, this AB set is touted to be the best Lionel F3s ever. In 1997, we get the Northern Pacific set, and then Lionel tries a new tactic, playing hard on the nostalgia of the boomers who are starting to drift away as electronics and command control become more and more part of the hobby. In 1998, we get the first of the post-war celebration sets, and you can guess that the F3s would be prominently featured. Starting with the Western Pacific F3s, Lionel would reissue almost every paint scheme the F3 had ever worn between 1998 and 2008. Texas Special, Southern Railroad, Canadian Pacific, Wabash, Rio Grande, Santa Fe, Baltimore and Ohio, basically bringing out all of the hits. Each of them was a visual match for their post-war counterparts with the latest in electronic control and sound. For the newer generation of Lionel collectors at the time, it was a wonderful introduction to a little bit of Lionel history. For the generation who remembered 1958 with fondness, Lionel's decision to reissue them was certainly a polarizing choice. After the conclusion of the post-war celebration run in 2008, we enter into the modern golden era of Lionel diesels in general, but especially the streamliners. This period is marked by regular runs of not just the F3s, but F7s, F9s, Alcos of all sorts, C-liners, everything, and all of them as detailed and prototypical as they've ever been. It took a while, over 70 years, but we are finally consistently seeing F3s that don't just meet the post-war bar, but clear it with room to spare. New road names and paint schemes, fun additions like breakdown B units that go through a whole motor failure scenario complete with lights and smoke, and even road name specific details based on the specific phase of F3s being modeled. 2025, however, stands out as the high watermark not just for the quality or uniqueness of the road names and paint schemes, but because Lionel hit all of the tech, nostalgia, and collectible notes at the same time. From the return of the historic New Haven McGuinness checkerboard, to the ATSF Cat Whisker and Lackawanna schemes that were only ever run once, to the Minneapolis and St. Louis, and the 1965 black ACL paint schemes that have never been done at all, this year had a little bit of everything. The star of the show was clearly the most impressive and expensive version of the Super Chief ever offered, featuring 12 21-inch passenger cars, 4 of them with different sound packages, behind a massive ABBA set of the F3s with brand new road-specific details. I absolutely cannot wait to get this monster on the layout. One thing I've heard loud and clear is that there seems to be a sentiment that unboxings are boring, because it's just taking stuff out of the box and no one really cares. I figured I'd try to spice it up a little here, and maybe we'll just get to the good stuff faster. Let me know down in the comments if this is more what you're looking for in an unboxing video. So there you go, 3 full sets of ABBA F3s in the best paint schemes and technology that Lionel has ever offered. One thing I'd like to point out is that despite sometimes having a deserved reputation for QA issues, what we have here is 12 Lionel F3 units, 24 smoke units, They came in 9 different boxes and every single one of them worked perfectly. Every light, every smoke unit, every electrocoupler, everything worked perfectly out of the box. I can honestly tell you that I had not a single problem with any one of these locomotives. Kudos to Lionel for that. Maybe I just got lucky, maybe I hit the lottery, but with as much as I paid for these locomotives, I'll take it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Once the Pacific Northern passenger cars come in, I'll definitely throw those behind the matching locomotives and run them around the layout for you. When the Super Chief arrives, we'll have all sorts of ridiculous fun with that one. Let me know which of the F3 paint schemes, no matter when they were produced, are your favorite, and whether or not you picked up any of these 2025 models. As always, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.